Alright friends, let's continue our bootcamp. This is yet another video of the bootcamp series, Web Developer or Software Developer Bootcamp. In today's video I would like to talk about what is actually web development, right? So before we get into writing code, before we get into things, I think it's imperative that you have the right mindset about what programming I think is in general, but especially what it is in the context of web pages, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to think about your entire experience on the web so far. So think about what you've been doing so far, nothing to do with technicalities. I'm sure that so far in your life you've been playing video games, you've been using social platforms, you've been using Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Word, whatever, bunch of other tools. But if you fundamentally think about what you've been doing is really clicking on things. You've been either using your mouse and the cursor of your mouse, you've been pressing some keys, and what did those things do? Well, when you click on something, it does some event, it does something. When you press a key or a set of keys or a key binding, as we call it, a shortcut in video games, you do something. If I press a space key, your character jumps. If I go to Programmer Network or Twitter and I press upvote, you're gonna, do something. So really programming is all about events, right? So if I go to Programmer Network platform here and I click on Vasilis, I'm gonna go to his profile. As I click through things, some things are gonna be happening. If I unfollow him, if I click this button, I'm gonna do some event. If I do this button, I'm gonna follow him. And in this context, what's really happening is like when I press this button, some event happens that sends some data to some server, and server stores this in a database and says, okay, Alex is no longer following Vasilis, for example. If I click here, oh, there's another thing. There's some menu shown. If I click on profile, I'm going to see my profile. If I click on this, something else is going to open. So fundamentally, as you can see, programming, especially web programming, is really all about reacting to some events, right? When I click this thing, open this. In simple words, this URL that you can see here is always linked to some view, something that represents what is there, right? So in this context, really on this web page on our social platform here, when I open this article, show the data for that article, right? And now, of course, this whole thing that you can see is composed using HTML and CSS and JavaScript. HTML is a hypertext markup language, and as we're going to learn soon, it really just holds this content. All of this text, all of these titles and stuff, they are basically, they are rendered in the HTML. All of these colors that you can see, these margins and paddings and distances, they are styled by CSS. And all of these events that I'm talking about now is really done using JavaScript, using a programming language. So again, if I click here, I'm going to go to the feed. If I scroll here, more things are going to load. All of these are fundamentally events. So, as I scroll, keep loading more of data from some machine, some computer, somewhere in the world. It might be in Germany, in the US, in China, in Russia, right? So fundamentally, we are getting data from some computer that we usually call a server. You must have heard of a term server, and it's called server because it serves some data, right? So server is fundamentally, in simple words, just the computer like you have in your home right now that you're watching this on. It's just a little bit more specialized in the context of uptime because such computer has to, be turned on 365 days a year. So it has better cooling, better backups and stuff like that. But fundamentally, it's also just a computer that has some hard drives, which are also specialized. But fundamentally, it's no different almost than your own computer, right? So if we go back to web development again, as you saw, programming, web development especially, is all about events. When I click on something, execute, run some code. When I hover my mouse over something, run some code. If I type something in here and I press share here, I will basically create another post. I'm gonna do some event. I'm gonna hit my computer somewhere, some server, and I'm gonna say, hey, how about you store this text this thing in some shape or form, so other people can also see it, on this platform. I can also delete it, but you can see fundamentally, if we try to boil it down to a very simple concept, because it genuinely is a very simple concept, you will notice that programming is nothing more than just reacting to some events. When I do this as a user, based on this input, do this. If I type this text into some field and I press share or save, take that data and store it somewhere on some computer, somewhere in the world. We don't know where it is. I mean, you don't know. I know where this computer is that serves programmer network, but you get the point. Now, when it comes to programming, right, the way that I want you to approach this whole bootcamp is fundamentally, I don't want you to use programming language. I don't want you to use the term programming. I just want you to use the term language. So now you're going to be learning 2 or 3 languages. They have very limited vocabulary. They have very few words. They're very primitive in its nature, but we can combine these words to compose sentences, as we call business logic. So in simple words, for example, right now I'm recording this video in English. English is a complex language. It has probably hundreds of thousands of different words. It has a very complicated grammar. There's a, past tense, and there's present tense, future tense, whatever, bunch of other rules. Programming doesn't have that many rules. Programming has very primitive set of rules, and then there's a bunch of other rules which are combined based on these rules. So in simple words, I want you to approach this course as if you were learning Spanish or any other language, right? So let's get rid of the programming thing, because again, if you get rid of the programming part, you will realize that, well, if I was learning Spanish, what would I have to do? Well, I would probably have to memorize some words, right? I want to go to a coffee shop and order coffee in Spanish. Well, I have to memorize a couple of words, but I also have to memorize a few other rules, right? Maybe, how does the sentence end in most languages? Probably put a dot in there, right? So what do we use comma for in spoken languages? Well, we're probably trying to make sentences make more sense, right? We make some breaks. So you can see that programming is not different. It's just a language. It's a language that's supposed to, it's used for the computers, so computers can understand what we mean when we say something. Computers understand various different levels of languages. There's very high level languages like JavaScript, the one that you're going to be learning here with me. And when I say high level, that just means that it has been, let's just put it this way, it's a more accessible language. So we are not giving operations to a computer in a very much detailed way, like working with memory, like a RAM of computer, whatever, CPU. We are kind of writing very almost English like words, and computer is able to actually understand what we mean. So you can say that the JavaScript and the web development is pretty high level, right? So we have a lot of low level languages. We have assembly, where you're almost directly interfacing with some of the hardware of the computer. For us, we don't do that. We're quite on a high level. So let's get rid of the term programming. Let's just use that, hey, I'm now learning a new language called JavaScript, and I'm learning some tool to style HTML. So I have a CSS, and it's gonna help me, style some content, some sentences, some data that I get from somewhere. And then this JavaScript language is gonna help me to to react to events. So with JavaScript, I'm going to be able to say, hey, when somebody clicks on this button, do something, execute, run some functionality, run some function based on my business logic. When somebody, inputs, when somebody goes to Programmer Network and they want to sign up, they can click one of these 3 things, or they can register with their email. If they click register with their email, I'm going to show these inputs where a user can input some email, password, and confirm, and then they can click this, and then they're gonna get an email, blah blah blah. So you can see all of these are just a bunch of events. When user does this, show them this, etc, etc, etc. So to summarize this part, programming is all about just reacting to your mouse, to your keyboard, reacting to some other events that some computers out there in the world might do themselves. Some computers are automated, so they might schedule some things that they do, and after a few hours they do it. A user might press command and R on Programmer Network platform, and they're gonna refresh it. A user might go here and log in, but all of this fundamentally is just reacting to events. All right, so this is how I want you to observe programming. It's very fundamental that you don't mistake programming for something complicated, something only for nerds, for geniuses. It's not the case. Programming as a concept is very, very simple. The hard part of programming is the things that I actually told you in the first video. Hopefully, if you haven't watched, please go back and watch the previous video, the introduction video, because there I spoke about that being a programmer isn't just about writing code, it's about many other things. So take this, kind of try to internalize this, try to understand this, try to go to a few websites, try to go play a video game, try to go to the websites that you generally visit, click around and internalize this. Understand that, all right, actually, so what I'm doing here in these web pages, I am saying when user is on this URL, show this. When user is on this link, this URL, show this. When I click on this, this is going to happen. So try to internalize this, because pretty much the whole web development, the whole thing that we're going to be doing, you and I, is really going to be about doing exactly that. All right, so in the next video, we're going to set up some development environments. So we're gonna have to set up your computer a little bit so you can actually write some code. And think about it this way: if you wanted to write a essay or something in the Microsoft Word, you would use Microsoft Word as an editor. Here we're gonna have to set up some editor, some tool where we can just easily write code. You can literally open your notepad if you want as well. You can use notepad to write your code as well. But that experience wouldn't be so great. So we're gonna install a couple of tools, or maybe just one for start, and then we're gonna start talking about writing some HTML and some CSS and stuff. Just introductory, just so you can kind of get a feeling of what we're gonna be doing, and then we're gonna progress with more concepts as we go. So don't worry, we're gonna do all of it, but we have to be careful not to do too much at a time. This is everything for this video. Try to take this video and the previous video as something very important, because I want you to have this exact mindset when continuing with getting into the programming in the next lessons. I wish you well. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys up in the next one.